صباح الخير، أهلا وسهلا فيكم.
Good morning and
شرفتونا
welcome.
بحضوركم اليوم معنا. اسمحوا لي بمقدمة قصيرة نوعا ما
I will
قصيرة
start with
كرمال
somewhat
ما
a
أخذ من وقت
short
الجمهور ومن وقت الحضور
introduction. I
الكريم ومن
don't
وقت
want to take
المشاركين
too much
معنا،
of
خاصة
your
أنه عدد
time
المشاركين كبير في
and the
هذه
panelists,
الجلسة
especially that
والضيوف
the
أيضا،
panelists
وسنستفيد
and the
من
guests
خبراتهم فيما
are,
يتعلق
and
بهذه
we
الندوة.
will benefit
المقدمة
from their
ستحدد
experiences.
المحاور الأساسية
The
لهذه الجلسة.
introduction will
لم
determine
تعد
the main
فعالية المحتوى
themes.
الرقمي تقاس بحجم الوصول أو
The
كثافة
digital
التفاعل فحسب،
content
بل
is no
بقدرته على
longer
إحداث
judged
أثر ملموس في
by
الوعي
the
والسلوك
imprint
والسياسات العامة.
it reaches,
وفي
but
سياق
also its
الصراعات
impact
والقضايا
on
العابرة للحدود،
public opinion,
يتحدد هذا الأثر من
and
خلال تفاعل
this
معقد
impact
بين
is
هوية
determined
صانع
through a
المحتوى
complex
وخبرته
interaction
وشبكاته وطبيعة الرسائل
between
المتداولة بين
the
السرد الشخصي
influencer,
والتوثيق
the
وأيضا
content
التحليل
creator,
القائم على البيانات،
and
فضلا عن
their
خصائص المنصات
ability,
الرقمية
their
والخوارزميات.
reach. In
كما
addition
تطرح
to the
نماذج التمويل
logarithms, the
والاستدامة الذكية
analysis,
المستمرة تتصل
and the other
بالاستقلالية التحليلية
challenges
وإدارة
when it
المخاطر
comes
القانونية والرقمية،
to
ما يجعل
the
مسألة
legal
القياس
risk of
والتقييم عنصرا حاسما في الحكم على
going
جدوى العمل
beyond
الرقمي
the
وتأثيره الواقعي.
restraints
إذا
that
كانت الإطالة
legal
كسر ما
coverage of.
أعتقد. أرحب بالضيوف
So
الكرام
therefore this
معنا هنا
introduction was
على
brief.
المنصة.
I would like to
أبدأ بالسيد
welcome our
جاي
panelists.
كريستنس، ناشط
I
سياسي
start
وصانع
with
محتوى.
Mr. Guy
أنتقل إلى
Christensen,
رحمة زين،
then
صحفية
Rahma
متخصصة
Zain,
باستراتيجيات
a
الإعلام،
journalist,
ومنها إلى
and
تاك
Tat
كوميدي
Hiki,
وناشط سياسي
an
فردي،
Irish
وأيضا
comedian
بلال
and
خالد
political
مصور فنان
activist,
تشكيلي. الخلفيات
Bilal
مختلفة كما
Khalid,
هو واضح، وأيضا
and
التجارب
these are
مختلفة أيضا. أبدأ معك
panelists
رحمة.
from
رحمة،
different backgrounds.
التعاطف الذي نشاهده
Rahma, the
ونلمسه
kind
على
of
وسائل التواصل
solidarity
الاجتماعي، هذا
we see
التواصل
now,
العاطفي والتعاطف العام،
and
كيف يمكن أن
how can it
نحوله
be turned
إلى
into
ضغط ملموس
a
يمكن
sort of
قياسه على الأرض؟
influence or
ما هي
pressure
الاستراتيجيات في هذا
that can
الإطار؟
be measured on the ground.
بتبدأ بالنفس، يعني هم بيبقوا عايزين ان احنا نحس بخيبة امل.
They want us to feel disappointed, and when you're disappointed, you start wondering what can you do. When you start thinking like that, you'll not do anything. Sometimes we see that people tend to believe what they like to believe. They believe the kind of thing that makes them do nothing. But when you live the realities that I speak with Egyptian colloquial accent, I do not like titles like influencer, political activist. This creates a schism between those who do and those who do not. There has to be a strategy. When I use social media, I'm just sort of letting off steam, or am I inviting people to be active through the organization? Guy will talk about this. The upschools, for example, when I asked people to upload the alternative platform, they should do that immediately, and we start thinking, what else can we do? When you see someone doing something, support them. This is the motive behind your message. It's legitimate, but how can it be turned into tangible work, like donating money, demonstrating, etc.? And I move to Bilal now. We're not talking about the message only, but translating this message, and how can this be achieved?
مسموع بلال.
في الحقيقة ترجمة هذه الرسالة على أرض الواقع تكمن في عدة أشكال، منها
can be looked at from different angles. First, let us remember that one of the real sources of influence are those Palestinian journalists who made the ultimate sacrifice when they paid with their blood their families, their children. As a cameraman who covered the genocide in Gaza, I think the impact through the image was very important. This is why people went out on demonstrations in Sydney, in Europe, in America, and some Arab countries. The impact of the image was on the individual and public opinion, how it helped to save the lives of some injured people. At a personal level, we got in touch with international organizations to save the lives of some people whose lives was in danger. There is a problem here that influencing social media will be big. We can see that through the hits, the likes, etc. in this digital world. But the impact of all of this on the ground was somewhat limited. Yes, it was limited for political and other reasons. Unfortunately, we sense that, unfortunately, freedom of expression in Western countries is much bigger than the Arab countries, and also there were restrictions. Unfortunately, there are some channels which are Arabic, but they're more biased towards the Zionist narrative than the Palestinian one. There are many reasons why this influence and impact was limited. Bilal uses the image tag, uses black comedy. Tag, this kind of black comedy, how does it help to form a kind of influence and opinion and make it tangible, noticeable on the ground?
I'm sorry, just a note. لمن يريد الترجمة.
For those who need simultaneous interpretation, there are translation devices available.
Thank you. And a word of warning to the translator. I'm Irish, so I speak very quickly as well, so just apologies in advance. I just wanted to say before I get into that, if it's okay, just to comment on, whilst it's been such an honour being here for the last few days, I've got a good friend from Gaza in Ireland, and when I was coming here, he said, "Oh, you're going to another conference," and he meant it ironically, as if, you know, we're still being slaughtered. The genocide is ongoing, and I know there are many Palestinians in the room, and I just wanted to try and put that focus in there, that sometimes it feels like at conferences we're reflecting on a genocide that happened many years ago, but it's ongoing. So speaking for myself, I want to move away from slapping myself on the back and saying that I've done well. People have done well, but the institutions are letting Palestinians down, continue to let Palestinians down, and we should never move away from that fact, I think. I think in terms of comedy, I found that when I was on camera pontificating, trying to convince people about Zionism or about colonialism, that they never listened to me, but that when I used comedy, it's got a really good way of disarming people, and if you make people laugh, and also with satire, it makes a supposedly very difficult, nuanced geopolitical situation, as the Zionists like to claim, that they, you know, you'd never understand the Palestine-Israel so-called conflict unless you had a degree in political science. And satire likes to make it really simple, that it's just maybe two lads living in a house in Cork. So before, as others were saying, the censorship really hit me and others, I was getting millions of views on my videos, and people were coming to me in Ireland saying, I actually didn't know that was what was going on in Palestine. And I think that's the most gratifying thing for somebody in this space or in comedy, to feel that you're...
Did comedy bring about real pressure on the ground, or did it just stay as really venting out on social media outlets?
I mean, this comes more to the limitations. I think ultimately, you know, we've all failed because the slaughter is going on. The comedy helped to build a movement, I think. You know, not just me, obviously, but people making satire and making content built this big movement. And I always think it's very useful to think how the enemy thinks. I think if the enemy had as many people as we have, had as much global support as we have, they would be using it to their advantage to affect political outcomes. Whereas sometimes in the pro-Palestine movement, we don't invest enough. We slap each other on the back and we say, we're going for another march, and then we go for coffee afterwards. But in terms of real change, it's not really happening. So I would argue, no, the comedy hasn't changed things on the ground. I can't look my friends from Gaza in the eye and say, I've helped things on the ground with my comedy when their families are still being slaughtered. But it helped to build a movement, and now what we need to do, I think, is to re-strategize and to not just endlessly go to, say, marches or conferences, but to say, the slaughter is ongoing right now. What can we do right now as a movement to stop that slaughter and to agitate for Palestinian justice and liberation?
Guy,
Guy, how do you feel the social media outlets can affect really on the ground? It is easy to sit down, view, and put likes, and to interact with a few words, but it is difficult to move. Therefore, how can we reach this point of bringing out a movement and awareness through social media outlets? And what is missing here in this regard in the social media outlets world?
The way I see it is you educate first and then you funnel that towards action. And, you know, social media drives engagement and views and popularity off of outrage, intense emotions. And, you know, I don't have to say it, but everything that's happening, everything that Israel's doing, everything that the American empire is doing is at its base level insanely outrageous. And so we have that to our advantage, but we can't just report on these things. We can't just educate on these things. We have to channel that. We have to create a funnel towards our content where we are educating people and then tying that to a direct action. Maybe it's participating in an event, raising money, supporting a certain politician or cause, doing something. But you have to go from a low friction, which is just, you know, interacting with the video, the likes, the engagement, into a high friction call to action. And that's how you create real change. And the way I see it is that this is a war online. The activism we are all engaged online, the things we say about Palestine, criticism of Israel online, even if you are not posting, if you are just engaging, you are participating in this war. Israel calls it their 8th front. They're engaged in 7 physical fronts on the ground, attacking aggressions against all of their neighbors. And as of January last year, they officially endorsed the 8th front, the digital front, the war of propaganda, the information war, the war on the American people's minds specifically, as official doctrine. You know, this was spearheaded by the ADL's Jonathan Greenblatt, a Zionist agent operating in the United States. And he went to the Knesset in January last year where he urged them, he had one goal: adopt the 8th front as official doctrine. He said capturing TikTok, which the ADL was behind, the forced sale of US TikTok, was critical in this 8th front. Changing how Wikipedia reports on Palestine was another aspect of this. So you see Netanyahu adopt this rhetoric very quickly in his speeches. He comes to the United States last year to talk to his fleet of American influencers, the ones that are being paid $7,000 a post. And he tells them, you know, he's giving them a lesson, and he's like, what is the most important thing for Israel's 8th front? What's the most important purchase? And he goes, TikTok, TikTok #1. Israel was behind the forced US sale of TikTok because they could not bear that it made the American public waver their unconditional support for their genocidal nation for the first time in history. You know, Zionists identified very quickly and very early on that ensuring the backing of an empire, first the British and then the American, was essential for the stability of their project. And so when the videos of the genocide started to go viral and the billions of views on TikTok shortly after the genocide began, you know, this was a massive problem quickly identified by Israel. And I think our side needs to take it just as seriously. As Jonathan Greenblatt says, deadly serious. We are soldiers in this digital battleground, and we need to act as such.
طيب يعني في هذه الحالة
In this case, Rahma, there are states that stand behind those platforms. What about the financial support, Rahma? How can we obtain sustainable financing that would allow us to go on in a way that does not affect the objectivity and the independence of the content?
This is the issue, right? When you start to depend on funding, you have people who have a say in what you do and what you say. For example, this is why I don't actually monetize my social media. When I got fired, I made sure to have a job where I would be independent. But that being said, for example, and I can add on to this, he is building an independent media and they do need funding. And this is something that we need to really hone in on because it's part of strategizing. I think a lot of Americans woke up one day to find out that their politicians were sold for quite cheap when it came to AIPAC. So this was, but then you go to the US, and I remember we were helping the student protests. And what is so interesting is the sum of the parts equals the whole. So how malicious media can be is that they dubbed the protesters, the students, children, like for me, I see them as children, 17-year-olds, 20-year-olds. But they speak like Guy over here, very articulate, they know what's right, they know what they want, they understand that how am I studying international law and then outside of the classroom it's being obliterated and disgraced. So then you have these very aware students being dubbed what by media? Infiltrators, terrorists. So they create a fear. They create a fear towards these students. So then let's discuss the funding. You go to the families. You go to families, you tell them, hey, listen, the Zionists, the counter-protest are a bunch of ex-IDF soldiers on university ground. They have private security. There's funding for a stage, and this is the offline work that is as important as the online work. Will you be giving funding for these students to help them organize? And the families, pro-Palestine, and I say if you're pro-Palestinian, you're at this point, you're just pro-humanity, you're just pro-common sense, they're scared. They're scared to give this funding because, as was just said, media is so vital in this war. If you fear me, you're not going to stand next to me. When I got fired, I got, are you all right? But they weren't quick to hire me back. People are scared. So we do need to stand one another and, like was said, educate people so that they don't steal the jargon, so they don't dictate who is the terrorist, so they don't dub if you are wrong or right. And that conversation is owned by us. And this, because what is Israel? Israel is just narrative. It's just a PR game. 3 key messages that they've perpetuated for so long, and in a mere 2 years, it has been collapsed. Because we hold the truth. And if you hold the truth, you have the power. But we need the backing for it. I don't want you to pat me on the back. I want you to stand next to me.
كيف يمكن الوقوف إلى جانبك؟
كيف يمكن ذلك? How can this be done? How can we stand next to you? By direct financing, Rahma?
الوقوف له تعدد أوجه.
So supporting you has so many faces and ways. We want to hear you give us the conclusion. Okay, talk is sweet, but also you should be generous. For example, he does alternative media. No, let us do crowdfunding to see who is the politician whom we can support, whether you with or against Zahran Mamdani. I don't agree with him necessarily, but
the way he won, the grassroots power that they don't want you to believe is very powerful. بدل ما انت احنا كعرب
as Arabs, we criticize each other without torturing me. Come and tell me and help me. So why we blame each other quickly? Rahma, let me listen to Guy. Guy, how can you continue on what things you rely on, there should be financial support. Where do you come up with it, and how can this financial support affect the credibility and the independence of the messages?
I mean, I don't come up with it. That's the thing. I'd like to echo what Rahma has said, that there is very little support. So, you know, if you take on this battle, I agree with the framework of it being a battle, certainly. And it seems like the other side is really well armed, a bit like in real life, is really well supported and really well armed. And I think what we get on this, and I'm not cracking out the violins because it's not actually about me. I'm hoping to, with the alternative media scene, we're building a kind of a new satire show that will ultimately be a platform. I hope to build a Saturday Night Live, but for anti-imperialists, for decolonizing minds. But to do that, you need money, you need funding. And so I'm involved in a lot of the alternative media scene in Britain and Ireland, and we're all, I mean, these are really reputable journalists, content creators, comedians who had vibrant careers until they stood up and said, we don't agree with genocide. And then all our careers were kind of ended overnight. And we're all scrambling around in Britain and Ireland going, does anyone have any money? Because we've got studios ready to go. But I think, as Rahma said, there's a real tendency for people to say, I get lots of direct messages from people saying, I love what you're doing, it's so brave, but they wouldn't be seen dead with me because they don't want to get their Instagram cancelled like my Instagram has been cancelled.
I saw this in real life.
So I do think there's a big thing there. I mean, like, say on one small issue, if I may, like in terms of the resistance, I come from Ireland, so it's just ludicrous to me that one can't even mention the word Hamas. Every time I'm in Britain, someone mentions the word Hamas and there's a gasp in the room. We need to fight back against that type of dehumanization online. We shouldn't back up the fact that you can't mention the Palestinian resistance, and if you do mention it, you get cancelled or shadow banned, and we accept that that's just a thing. The other side would never allow that. I come from Ireland. If we continue to dehumanize and delegitimize the Irish resistance, we wouldn't have ultimately had a peace process. So as long as Palestinians and their advocates and their allies around the world allow the West to do this ludicrous delegitimization of the Palestinian resistance, we're not going to get anywhere. And that battle, I think, starts online. It's ludicrous that I can't mention the word Hamas without getting my account taken down. It's a farce. How could we ever possibly have a route to peace? So collectively, I think we need to stand with each other more. You know, in Britain as well, there's a group called Palestine Action. Activists stick their head above the parapet and they take the fight directly to the war machine in Britain. And a lot of the time they get isolated. I was talking to a woman recently in Scotland. She's got 2 young kids. She went to Elbit Systems and she did a little bit of damage, whoop-de-doo, to the war machine, and she's facing years in prison. She's got 2 kids, and she wonders where the support is. So again, we're great at patting each other on the back. We're great at saying, well done, you're a great lad. But in terms of investment and sticking our head above the parapet with those who are brave enough to do so, we're very, very slow to do that. And I think that needs to change urgently or we won't get anywhere.
يعني إن كنت أنت تاج
Tag, if you call for unity and you say that the financing is weak for what you do, then what does Bilal say? Bilal, your situation is more difficult, isn't it? There is nothing to be said after what the whole world has witnessed. 2 years of crying and appeals and saying that we have to strategize the situation where, as Rahma said, there should be financing to the narrative that we have to back us. So when they kick out a journalist from an organization because he stands with Palestine, at least we should give him an alternative, or to have a platform that needs equipment, or to develop or to build a content hub, that we should back it up. And even on the ground in Gaza, let me just remember that the equipment that we lose in the Gaza Strip have no alternative and no substitute, first of all, because of the skyrocketing prices, maybe 10 or 20 fold higher. So in some cases we can provide an alternative from outside where someone can continue what the journalist has started in Gaza, and until now, unfortunately, vis-a-vis the issue of the loss of information or erasing them altogether, the number of the massacres that are horrific taking place daily, the journalists were not enough to cover those. And now, when we say, quote unquote, this ended, we should document all these massacres from zero, even to the testimonies and the archiving. We need to have a museum for genocide where everything relative and related to what happened to the Palestinians should be there. Why the Holocaust have museums, not only in one country, but in so many countries? And until now, they are holding on to this narrative. And as soon as you go into this museum, without them speaking, the pictures and the images and the way they are shown, whether it is true or fake, you are brainwashed. So automatically you will support them, and thus they have kept their legacy, which is the Holocaust that they call the Jewish Holocaust, and which Israel was based and built on this narrative. Anyone who criticizes Israel nowadays or their activities or behaviors, then he is anti-Semitic automatically, and you are against the Israelis who have been persecuted. And unfortunately, they teach this to the generations, that if you have one person from that generation who lived through the Holocaust, they come and show him on the media and showcase him with interviews and meetings, yet he is one or two people. So how about if this genocide has happened live on air in front of our eyes?
This state has a clear strategy which stands behind it. You are individuals with very limited resources looking for maybe personal funding. This can have agendas behind it. How can you manage? Yes, journalist or any content creator, any human being for that matter, who is propagating the cause of the Palestinian people, any amount of money he or she gets will be subject to scrutiny, then bank accounts will be closed, and social media accounts will be closed. So therefore, we have to resort to some local organizations who can act as mediators with outside organizations, and it's mostly personal funding. I produced 2 films funded by me personally, because every time I approached an organization, and because the film I intend to make criminalizes Israel, and because it speaks of the deliberate killing of a Palestinian journalist in a hospital, people start finding excuses that they cannot fund this project. We go to Guy. Guy, how did you manage to deal with obstacles like this and manage to tell your story and get the funding, and despite Trump's attempt to stop you from that?
I'm entirely community funded by my audience. I don't take corporate sponsors. I think that's the most trustworthy thing. And what we saw in especially Western media after October 7th was they purged any journalist, any anchor, any voice in the mainstream media that was critical of Israel in any way, or supportive or empathetic in any manner to Palestinians. They kicked them off. They shut down their shows. Those people went to platforms like Substack. And that's where I think a lot of the new media is being built, like Drop Site News, like Zeteo, and other outlets that are starting to come together and form what I hope is the future of new media, that is not owned by billionaires, that is not owned by corporations or some genocidal state influencing their reporting, but it is community funded, it is in service of the public interest, And so I think that, platforms like Substack are very good, as well as Upscrolled, which connects you directly with your audience. And so, and I just want to say one thing about, free speech when it comes to, American students. It's a lie in America. There's no such thing as free speech for American students, especially when it comes to Palestine and Israel. I was expelled last year for TikTok videos where I criticized the Israeli occupation, and a congressman, Richie Torres, who took millions of dollars in Zionist money, AIPAC money. So he would fund Zionists, arm them with billions of dollars while neglecting his own district. Because I criticized him, he sent a letter threatening to investigate me using federal police forces, the Capitol Police, based on lies. And we had a ruling recently, last month, that in our favor, a preliminary injunction, saying that they violated all my rights. There was no evidence to do any of this. And my story is not unique. I'm just here to tell you that I'm one of thousands of American students, our activists, our bravest, the next generation who will lead my family and my fellow people in the United States, hopefully to a better future, one that doesn't look like this.
طيب أكثر من نقطة أشرت إليها.
More than one point you mentioned. You said there are thousands. Why did you succeed whereas others have failed? You talked about personal or community funding. Sometimes there is a trend without any real message behind it, but yet it gets around. How can you go beyond these obstacles?
Well, I was definitely lucky. I got connected with a very strong community when I attended college, with full knowledge that if I was leaked my attendance, I would be attacked in this way, and they would do everything they can to expel me, to shut me down, to stop my career from progressing. And so I was lucky. I had, professors who were friendly at my university. I had friends, Palestinian friends, and I was connected with the SJP there, as well as everyone back home who set me up from the very beginning of my academic career in higher education to prepare for that moment. And I was lucky that, the ACLU picked up my case. But not everyone is lucky like that. And that we need justice for every single one of these students. The most important movements in the United States started on college campuses. That's why Zionists in the state of Israel have set up thousands of organizations on campus to do outreach with students to bring them into Zionism. They've identified it as a critical thing. There's actually something called Project Esther by the Heritage Foundation, the think tank that was behind Project 2025. And its goal is for the Republican administration in the United States. It directs them the policies they need to take to crush the pro-Palestinian movement in the United States. And do you know how many of these policy goals, these policy outlines, the Trump regime has already committed to and carried out? Over 50%. They are actively and telling us out in the open that they are destroying the pro-Palestinian movement. They are destroying our free speech. They are destroying our right to boycott and protest and mobilize against this genocide and against the empire that we live in over there.
طيب من هنا رحمة، يعني النجاح كيف يمكن أن يقاس؟
Rahma, how can success be measured in this case? Can it be judged by the access people have, the impact on public opinion?
Is something, for example, Guy was saying about educating first and foremost. You can't assume people know what you know. Because we are in the region, we are privileged to be aware of how I grew up knowing my grandfather was an editor-in-chief. He knows the Zionist mindset. So I grew up understanding what Zionism is. You go to some of the students in the US, you go to some of the Western world is now waking up to Epstein files. We know these files long time ago, because Israel is espionage. This is what we know. They don't, so, and again, like what Bilal is saying, it does start with putting money in narrative, having a proper media strategy. A movie as effective as the voice of Hind Rajab, where a young girl was shot 355 times. How is this movie not shown in every single school? How is this movie not shown in every single school? Why is there no museum? Why do we assume people know what we know? We have to consciously own the narrative and understand how dangerous it is for revisionist history, for them to dictate public opinion, for them to be because they dehumanize you in order to get away with brutalizing you. When you are, because the thing is, if I tell you 300 people died, ماشي? 300 people died. Do you sympathize with that sentence, or do you sympathize with Mona, a young woman, went to a university? I created a story that's already there. The way their media has been working is stripping people from their stories and creating them in numbers so that the sympathy and the relatability isn't there. I am looked at as the other. So when I am killed, you don't sympathize with me. And human emotion is something that is very important. Very important. And we also need to start creating our own tables. We're talking, I'm talking a lot now, but this is very important because the general influencer, the makeup influencer, the artsy influencer is sometimes the one that can be more effective than people who are, telling you need to wake up because for the good of all humanity. So you do need the makeup influencers, the Arab and the non-Arab. But unfortunately, they are dictated by companies like Coca-Cola, like I don't know. So you need to give them an alternative funding. I remember I went to one influencer, I'll never forget, Arab. I told him, how are you not speaking up? Because when this all happened, you look to the people that you like. What is their stance? And he told me, what keeps my light on at home? مين اللي بيفتح لي النور في البيت؟
بحاجة للتمويل وهذا ما أشرنا إليه.
المنبع. فإحنا لازم نروح على المنبع.
Go to the sources and the narrative. Why did I pay $170 million for Hezbollah and we're just watching? Okay, about Tag, I come to you. How do you know that your message has got through? What standards or measures do you use?
Yeah, well, that speaks because I feel like I've been a bit negative as well. I wanted to say that we've gone into this with our eyes wide open as well. We understand I want to agitate for a better world. I didn't get involved in this cause for pats on the back. I didn't get involved in this cause because I wanted to make money. Obviously, that would be a crazy thing to do. I would have picked the other side if I wanted to make money. But I got involved in this type of work because it's in my soul, it's in my heart, particularly as an Irish person, where I think the Irish and the Palestinians just understand each other in a really deep and profound way. And it's been the honor of my life, actually. It's given me a sense of purpose that I didn't have in comedy beforehand. So to answer your question, I think how you know it works is whether it's comedy or any type of content. I think exemplified when we were on the recent flotilla, where you'd have a mainstream narrative led by the likes of the inimitable Piers Morgan saying that it was like a selfie yacht and there's no point to it whatsoever. But I and others had been doing live streams with content creators in Gaza, and I had several messages from people in Gaza saying, I saw your last video, we can't wait to welcome you to Gaza, we're writing messages on the beach. I mean, I would take my lead from people in Gaza. If it matters to people in Gaza, if they don't see it as a selfie yacht, if they don't see what we're doing as posturing, but that we're actually making some small difference to kind of change the narrative around the hypocrisy that Palestine faces all the time, then we're doing our job. I would listen to the people on the beaches of Gaza rather than Piers Morgan for any kind of affirmations as to what we're doing.
I think
بلال بسمع منك فيما يتعلق
Bilal, regarding this point specifically, how do you measure success? Is it through the largest imprint reaching the largest number of people, or the change your message creates? Success cannot be measured by numbers or the number of people who liked or watched or viewed this content, because simply the life of one child in Gaza is more worthy of all of these things. Also, regarding, for example,
العالم قديش تحرك مثلا
how much movement there have been in the world in the last 2 years, the boycott movement, the protest movement, was as a real influence on what happened in the genocide. This was very limited because the genocide continued for more than 2 years, despite the fact that many people. Don't you think there is an accumulative effect? Yes, indeed. The change comes slowly and gradually, and the fruition is expected later, even if we do not see it in our generation. I'm sure the future generations would notice that. In Gaza, we paid a heavy toll for this. We see everyone who sympathized and expressed solidarity with the Palestinians, although many did not know the history of the Nakba. This genocide, this war, came to effect this kind of change and to raise the level of awareness. The Samud flotilla was the result of these efforts. Fatin Alwan has just joined us. She is the correspondent of Al Jazeera. We hear from you about measuring success, funding, and other important things. How can we measure success specifically? Greetings to you all. I will start by a question to Guy, to Rahma, and Guy, هل تعرف من
ردت
No,
رحمة
don't,
عليك
don't.
فاتن.
No, no. No, I just want to know because it's important.
رحمة قالت أنت واحدة من أعظم الصحفيين.
Rahma said you are one of the greatest journalists in Gaza. Guy, do you know me?
تسأل إن كنت تعرف من
She is asking you, do you know who she is?
هل
So,
تعرف من هي؟
So do you know who
أعتقد
she is?
بأنك تشيرين فاتن إلى
I think, Fatin, you are trying to say that it's not always possible for those, even those who maybe risk their lives, to tell the story of people like people in Gaza or other places. It's not a guarantee that their voices are heard. Despite the fact that the Palestinian narrative has managed to break many taboos, but unfortunately there was a crime being committed, and that is the marginalization of the voices of those who are on the ground. Many voices in Gaza, and there is continuous reliance on their content, but without attaching necessarily the importance to their presence on the ground, and this has raised many questions. There is a journalist and there is an influencer. I chose to be in the middle between these two because every international organization you work for, there is a margin. Fatin, is it enough to stand in the middle? Yes, definitely, because I'm required as a journalist on the ground to cover what the channel or the editorial board and the hierarchy of the organization chooses. They decide what to cover, and they think they should cover all other calamities, not just the Palestinian one. We have the Sudan, the Yemen, the Libya, Morocco, and we have more than one story. Marginalizing one of them is a crime in itself. So consequently, the editor-in-chief, God help them, how they can divide the time and the weight attached to each story. In Gaza, there was a massacre taking place. Most news organizations worry about breaking news, and many other stories were lost between these breaking news. So the alternative was for us to tell the other stories, the simple little stories. The little boy in Jenin who went on his bicycle at a time when the whole world was focusing its attention on the D9 and bulldozers, and at the time when the old man Abu Ahmed, because he is an invalid sitting at home, and the Israeli forces forced him to evacuate, but the Abu Ahmed's son was not able to get to him before the street was dug up, and he was left alone. He was motionless.
Here we are talking about the traditional agendas, and those agendas could be closer to the citizen, which is the social media outlets. And at the same time, social media needs support and finances, which could dictate conditions. So here, aren't we going back to square one in terms of the traditional media who have their own agenda and social media have their own agenda, which could be dictated by the financiers? So how can we come out of this dilemma? We can choose to be a voice without financing. Can you reach that point? Yes, definitely. If you are in contact with the street and your goal is not to carry out a business through covering a cause. For example, social media outlets, all what is seen on my sites are channeled to social issues. For example, I say, here is the link, and you can reach out to people to provide them with medicine, with money, with any kind of help. Or you can do that through me. At the end of the day, you want to survive and you need an income. But when you face a humanitarian issue that is so huge, then it would become a shame in all languages to turn a genocide into business. She's speaking English now.
Time that people are losing their lives, that you want to make a business deal. Yes, I need to survive at the end of the day. Yes, I need to be. I even went further by, like, guys, I even deleted the subscribe from my Instagram because some people were attacking some journalists or some influencers or others because of this. So at the sensitive time, no, I don't need your money. I need the voice of the people to reach and to be honest and loyal. What bothered me the most is that even in this racism,
فاتن يعني استفيد من وجودك معنا انضممت.
Fatin, you joined us late, so you mentioned to reach a group of people, but here also you need financing, because to reach a large number of people, that also needs money so that you can post a video or a message. So you need to spread this message. How can you overcome this? Not only in terms of eating and bringing a life or provision for you to stay alive, but rather the standards and the rest of the story. If the support is from people to people, then it's good. But if your message is having a goal, then you should get support from the people because you are trustworthy and because you're on the ground And you know what you say, the financing could be through ethics. If you want to pay money to support this person or that person, if we open the gateway for financing and the questions thereof, then there are accusations directed to the person. There is something called natural bridge. I don't know, why do I need financing to spread a message? So the financing could be your own voice on the ground. I understand that the financial support is the main engine, but I don't understand that at a time where all social media outlets provide you with the possibility to go on forward. So why do you need the financing support? She is asking her, what social media outlets, is this all they do? And what about the shadow banning and the monitoring? The best thing that this experience has given in the past 2 years, through which I got to know Rahma and Guy and Tag and other people, something called collaboration. Collaboration and the remix. A remix has an original person of the video. When you have a remix, then you are sending the image. You have 3 million followers. So when you do a remix with the journalist, no one knows him or her on the ground, but you do a search. Even social media has their own ethics and ethos. So when you download his material and you remix with this person or collaborate with this person, then you are giving credibility to the content. You are turning the 3 million of yours to this person on the ground. The mere fact of turning the attention to this person on the ground, you open for him horizon to work with covering the material and the content. I'm on the ground, I can support you financially without saying, I want you to do this picture from this corner and ignore the rest. No, you're on the ground, I give you money in respect for your work, and go shoot images. This person becomes a trustworthy for the 3 million, because this is the financial support that you need. You become a theme for individuals who could provide you the truth. At the end of the day, when you accept, for example, today I am participating with you in Al Jazeera forum today, okay? I woke up 7 a.m. with the difference of timing between you and me, let alone why I am in France and I am a Palestinian journalist, was in Palestine, but today I'm here. Why I am here? When the effort that you do on the street shows that the last scene is a bulldozer chasing you and other journalists. So I decided that I am the hero. But on the day when I was pursued, I had 40 journalists with me also running away and chased by this bulldozer. But I go back home and I find my car damaged, threats. After 9 months, I found out that I don't want to leave the country because they have a settler preoccupied for 3 or 4 months to call you every night from 1 a.m. till 9 a.m. threatening you, we're gonna blow you up. We're gonna blow you up. Avichai Adroi, spokesperson of the IDF, would come to my post and threaten me because of my activities with Al Jazeera, my work with Al Jazeera. And then they call your mom and say you have to shut your daughter up or we will arrest your sons, and they will name the sons. So I reached a point where I am threatened by my own family to be persecuted. You either get out or your family will pay the price. So it is either a bullet or a prison or arrest, or we will arrest your family, your brothers. So we want you to leave. Why? You, out of all journalists, don't have an answer. So you try to protect your family and keep your voice. So you go out of the country in order that your voice resumes. For access, I am spreading my message. My voice here is heard. All those in the hallway, if you have 3 million or otherwise, you can hear me. So the financial support, we don't want to be slaves for it. You need true support, steadfastness. But if you decided to be a journalist, then go to the influencer. The influencer is the one who brings the change. We want to know about the nucleus of ethos in this issue. Also, what bothers me a lot is that we, the Palestinians, are the ones who are owners of the voice. And those who are participating in conferences worldwide have not set foot in Palestine at all. They've never visited Palestine. Even the journalists in Palestine, we have seen them killed. We have seen their limbs cut off and severed. So those were not on the map of awareness worldwide to spread awareness about the Palestinian cause. So I'm using my presence here to tell Diego, Tag, and everybody else, and Rahma. Rahma, I know your frustration and anger because you decided to hold on to the ethos of this job and career and to respect those on the ground and others, because many others have exploited what is on the ground, and there was stealing. Before we speak about the financing, we have to speak about respecting those on the ground, those who sacrificed with their blood, soul, life, limbs, in order to be the voice of Palestine on the ground. I apologize if I digressed, but I decided to be here to talk about this subject. We are proud that you are with us, and we want this message to go to everybody. Bilal and all those who are with us support the Palestinian cause. You pointed to the issue of cooperation and collaboration between those who present this message or want to spread it. The support size that you have received, is this a new strategy that could be adopted, which is collaboration amongst all of you in order to send the message and to keep the content according to a certain narrative that you see as true and factual without being affected by the financing? It was breaking the wall of silence in a way that is so great. When I was banned, I found other voices from outside calling on you to collaborate on your video. And this was the method of the back road in order to break the digital siege and monopoly on the narrative. Some were so great in finding solutions. The trend, for example, was one of the ways to circumvent things. Here, I want to tell you, I want to speak about this cup of coffee, how beautiful it is. I bought it, but here, I don't talk about it. So for the first 3 seconds, I have fooled the algorithm. There was an agreement, and Rahman knows that. There was an agreement on back rooms to manage the operations in the coverage. And that means you have a job, you have coverage, and you have an operation room that is behind the scene, which says, guys, we want to put this content. Okay. Many times I would abandon my material and send it to Zain or Ahmed or Nicole or Jinan or others. Please, guys, I don't want to download it because I have a shadow ban. It is powerful, it is exclusive. It doesn't matter. Take the material and spread it around and cooperate with me. But we want to break the barrier of silence. So I distributed to the back road. The back road also were shut down, so they used others. So there was a network of magic theme behind closed doors, and I, as a journalist, covered the Palestinian cause for 25 years, and for the first time, I feel that we were able to overcome the silence wall through the miracle of social media, which has spread the voice to all the world with AI. Because if I cover in English to TRT and through social media to narrate unnarrated stories which are domestic or local, and so this speaks about the graduation, the gradual talk to the others. In Egypt, for example, we have to cover with some emotions. In the US, with facts, we have a problem of the Gen Z, Generation Z or Z, snap, snap, snap in the beginning, but Gen Z were tired, so they would come to me in the street. I like when a 13-year-old boy comes to me and say, I am a big fan. Why the hell are you a big fan of me? I'm old enough to be your mom, sweetheart. How do you even know me? So he says, because you're the only one who talks to me in a way that I understand.
تعرف ليه
وطريقته, the way he understands is, for example, the news yesterday on the most dangerous decisions taking place, they say, we don't understand. So you tell him there is no West Bank, Oslo died. Well, I hope we have given you enough time because you caught up with us late, but we have to open it now for Q&A from the audience. Please go ahead. Peace be upon you all. Yusuf Kasmiya, producer and commentator. Speaking about the sources of influence and the steadfastness of influencers as new media faces, to what extent can this popular momentum that they have to be steadfast in front of integrated institutions who work with big budgets and long-term strategies? So don't those organizations have enough influence to contain this influence and to bury it gradually, and maybe not through direct confrontation, but maybe with the passage of time? Thank you.
مين بحب يجيب على هذا السؤال؟
Who wants to answer? Guy, please.
To gradually erase, our knowledge, especially Westerners' knowledge of, the evils of Zionism, the truth about the imperial core, we live in. And, they've been talking about it this week. There was a clip of, it was a Zionist conference, and they were talking about how this is a good opportunity now because everyone in America is concerned about ICE and, these federal soldiers rampaging through our communities, doing ethnic cleansing. And so the Americans are going to forget about all the images of Gaza. And I think that for me, more than anything, and also what I try to push out as a narrative, as a message, is that Palestine was the key to unlocking everything for me. And I've learned this more than anything, the liberation of Palestine is connected to the liberation of Americans from our empire. And so, when ICE is training with the IDF in Israel, when they have an office there, when they're using the same technology from Palantir, the same technologies trained in this genocide, our liberations are tied. Everything that our empire does to, the people of the world to exploit them and keep them in war, and all for the sake of profit for our elite class of billionaires, it always comes back to hurt us as well in America. And so the only way we're going to be free is if the Palestinians are free, and that's what we need to talk about. We need to connect ICE to the IDF. ICE is the IDF. It's American Zionism. It's an ethnic cleansing. ICE has been posting online how they're going to deport 100 million people. There's not 100 million illegal immigrants in the United States. There's 100 million brown and black people. It's ethnic cleansing, and we need to tie these ideas and these liberation movements all together so we can achieve collective liberation for all of us.
In the name of Allah, Ben Jadaiyu, researcher in media and press, Jamiat, the University of Ben Tufail from Morocco. All what comes our way in terms of narratives and numbers, information and data regarding the war on Gaza, there are several types of data, but sometimes we forget the psychological and behavioral component on the recipient and the viewer. So those influencers worldwide show that this type of behavior has many positive elements. So this is the relationship of integration between the influencer and the journalist. Fatin said there is an integration relationship between both. So here we speak about the social aspect. How can content makers give us concepts and abilities to consolidate and cooperate and collaborate in a real sense? So the question here is, how can we work to reach true enablement and to better this relationship in order to redefine the data, in order that this relationship, which is integrated, to become subject to career and professional guidelines. Fatin, please. Look, we are moving into a new era which needs guidelines to understand the mechanisms, the integrated role between me as a journalist, and I insist to say I am a journalist who is an influencer. So if you were a journalist and want to be a content creator, then you should maintain the content creation journalism. Your role, therefore, is not to give me your opinion. I don't want your opinion. I want information. I want data. If you want to give your opinion, go ahead and do it elsewhere. So this is what separates between the journalist and the influencer. We should maintain the ethos completely. And many a times we have entered into something called self-censorship, where you are afraid to comment or share your post for fear of being persecuted and prosecuted. So imagine you are taking place with the protest. So imagine that you will be the first one to be shot dead. If you are a group, then one, second, and the third might be shot dead. If you are an army or an entire group, then they cannot shoot dead a whole nation. So maybe you don't know me, you saw my video. Before you share, there is a responsibility upon you also as a recipient, because the fast scrolling carries responsibility on your shoulder. You saw me speaking. Okay, who is this? Google me or chat GPT me, and to know who I am in order to get a quick answer. If you trust me and what I say is true, is it based on numbers, is it real or not? Many influencers of fame, they say, yes, Jeffrey Epstein is alive and he is in Israel. Look, I don't want to do fact checking to correct your lies. So you as a recipient or an influencer, you heard this rumor, you should take an active role. Will you support this one who promotes lies and has many followers and others, or will you take the gist and the right information? Here comes the integrated role between you and me. I don't want to be a victim of media that is directed or an influencer who is directed. How do you know they are directed or not? Search. AI has given you everything on a gold platter. So we sometimes know that you watch, but you cannot comment. So you're suffocated. No. So the relationship is integrated. I am without you is nothing, and you are with missing information without me. So here comes the beautiful circle through which we provide information accurately. Let me say something briefly. I see, humbly said, that values and holding on to our identity in the future is the only thing that will save us. لأنه for the longest time we have seen how media boasts development.
We are so advanced as humanity, and look at this conference, and look at this institution, and look at this new AI, and look at this, but we've realized we're working towards a globalized world that's leaving behind very key values. And here in the region, we need to hold on to these very key values that for the longest time was dubbed uncivilized, backward. But it is these very simple, fundamental values that can at this point save us. When I'm talking specifically about the region, and I'm going to say this part in Arabic, حتة مثلا عقدة
So the issue of the foreign person, the Westerner, this makes us undermine ourselves. We should abandon this. We should look into our own values and not the values of others and the foreigner or the Westerner, etc. So when you put a content, you should ask yourself, what is my intention? If I do a live with Fatin, this could cause her a problem because of the area that she is in, or because she will be targeted. So I should ask myself, do I want to show this piece of news even though it will jeopardize her life or not? So you should ask yourself, what is your intention? This also, how will it be influential? Will it be a strategic move, or bravo, I took the scoop? So Rahma, and this is a dilemma that we live daily, even on TV or traditional media. There is a dilemma about the life of the journalist and the piece of news itself. Would this piece of news be worthy of maybe making the journalist put at risk? Thank you, Rahma. Thank you, Fatin. And thank you, Guy. And thank you, Tag. Thank you all so much for taking part. And thank you, the viewers, and all those who took part with us. Our time is up, unfortunately, and we have to end it here because we have an upcoming session with Mayada Abdu in 10 minutes, and it is regarding influencers and issues. That's the theme. Thank you all. Shukran lakum.